I wrote my new book, The Art of Caring Leadership, to be both a wake-up call and an invitation for leaders who want to uplift their teams and organizations by putting their people first. Most of us think we care, but caring leadership is about doing, taking action in a way that makes a tangible difference to our teams and our workplaces. Now, more than ever, at any time in history, we need to know what leading with heart actually means for us, for our workplaces, and for the world. The Art of Caring Leadership is a practical guide that will help you decipher what caring leadership means in practice through a framework that uncovers the steps you can take every single day. If your people know you care, not just about what they do, but who they are and can become, they will move mountains. To order your copy of the book, visit theartofcaringleadership.com. Hello, everybody. It's Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast, and I'm so excited today. So I finally am able to get on here with Asif Sadiq. He is a special person out in the world. He and I both actually were folks that got the employee engagement top employee engagement awards for inspiring workplaces. I don't even know exactly what the award is. I should really know what the name is. But we both got it. And since then, I've been kind of watching him from afar and just like seeing all of the great work he's doing out in the world. And so there was something that he did on LinkedIn, because there's so many, I can't even point a finger, but there was something, and I was like, I have got to have him on the show. So welcome, Asif.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here. We talk about all the good stuff, and we like to highlight the good stuff, and it's the good stuff, no matter if it's the bad stuff or the good stuff, right? So I want to have you introduce yourself. So where are you right now in your leadership journey?
Sure. So I'm currently, or I've just recently actually taken up a new position in my own journey. So I'm currently sort of leading D&I, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, for Warner Media. Based in the UK now, after spending 14 months in Germany, which is probably a story in itself, and probably needs a whole podcast just to talk about that. But yeah, great to join Warner Media and sort of head up their equity and inclusion efforts globally.
Wow, that's awesome. And now that you've been, and we were talking a little bit before we started rolling, how do you feel? Do you see yourself, 10 years ago and then like 20 years ago, do you feel like you changed much as a leader?
100%. I think, the 20 odd years of doing this, I've realized how, when I started on my journey, it was so much about adapting to, I remember reading books and, all sorts of, you have these sort of sessions with your friends and people who work in industry, and they tell you when you go into this industry. I remember when I went into financial services, I worked for Ernst & Young, and they're like, oh, you have to behave this way, you have to wear suits like this, you have to get this watch and wear black shoes and all that kind of stuff, and how you should talk, how you should present yourself. And it's interesting, as I reflect on that, as I've gone through that journey, and then even interestingly joining Adidas, where I was prior to this, very casual sort of environment, really relaxed. And all that really made me understand that actually I need to be me. I need to be authentic to who I am, because it's not really about adapting to different working environments or different styles. Those environments will adapt to me. If I'm myself, I'm productive, and people clearly recognize you when you go into any organization, or when you go for a job, for who you are, not for how well you adapt to them. And I'm now really sort of fixated on the piece that, I'm a cultural add. I'm not a cultural fit for any organization. I add to it, bringing my own authentic self, my lived experience, my own sort of way of doing things. One of the big things I've been focusing on recently is, and I've actually done it throughout my career, but I talk about it a lot, is being a human leader. We need to show everything that every leader has learned. Or even, this, all the leadership courses of the past, all the big universities, colleges, when they used to talk about leadership, it was about, a leader who has all the answers, a leader who doesn't show any vulnerability, a leader who's strong. I'm like, what? All that doesn't count anymore. People want to see leaders who are human, leaders who don't have all the answers, but are ready to explore, leaders who show vulnerability, leaders who get it wrong. We're human. Humans relate to humans. but we need to get into that space. And for me, it's been that. I am truly myself now. I never say, even after all these years of doing this, that I have all the answers. But hey, I have some experiences that I share, and I bring that into my leadership style. But an open and transparent style, which I would like that people can always question, people can always explore and give a different opinion, because different opinions are important, because it disrupts the patterns we build up in our minds or how we've always done things. That's what needs to be really challenged. But we need to create an environment of really learning and growth, which I think is huge.
That's huge. And one of the things that always strikes me, there are folks who are like, I'm just being me. Like, hey, this do you movement, right? This do you. The problem with this, here's the problem with the do you movement. Yes, I believe being authentically, like authenticity, it's in my book, it's the first chapter. But we can't be authentically jerks. We can't say, this is just me. Like, I could give a care what you think. I can run over you and I won't talk. This is just, I'm doing me. And it's like, no. Like, we actually have to go exist as humans on
Very good point.
Right. So we have to, it's almost like selective or like, intuitive authenticity or something. It's a different, the word, it has to be adjusted now, I think, for just this new reality. Reality. It's a real reality that's already existed.
And do you know what? You raise a really valid point, because that is one of the big things, right? But how do we then change the culture? In my mind, we create a culture that is one that celebrates that authentic identity, but in a way that it has limits or limitations around what are we talking about? Because what we're trying to say is that, yes, we want people to be authentic, but at the same time, I mean, if you're not a nice person, our culture in the working environment should be that you exit yourself, that the environment's not for you. So the culture is the foundation, right? So this culture of, where we value different opinions, where we respect each other, like, those basic values that every organization has, they're the blueprint of what the culture should be in an organization. And then on that, you add that authentic layer of how you live and breathe those values, those cultures, and bring in some values that are important to you. Oh, yeah. But that's doing it in a way without actually, just being a jerk at work, because that's not going to help anyone.
Yeah, and it's one of these things I think about as we talk about this. There's the values that are written on the wall, on the letterhead, on the paper, in the drawer, right? And then there are those that are lived out. And so I like to relay, after we talk about values, I like to relay norms, and because the norms are the things that we actually hold people accountable to, which is what creates a culture. Because otherwise, those values don't create the culture. It's the norm. That's how we actually behave and what we accept and what we don't accept, right? And so I think those are even when we're looking at inclusion, we're looking at, because authenticity really boils down to, can we be ourselves? Can we be authentically ourselves at work? Can we show up as who we are in our shoes? The answer, we want it, you and I both want it to be yes. But he wanted to be yes with the backdrop of the norms. And the norms had to have been agreed upon by the big plethora of people in the organization. It can't just be norms passed down by a leadership or just by a certain man or just by a certain type of person. It needs to be norms that are adopted by everyone. And then now you put that in there, now authenticity can happen. Just like what you're saying, right? Now it can happen.
100%. And also, actually, one of the big things around being authentic is where, when you look at the last 18 months and everything that's changed for us in the world around us, there is this danger, I think, when I look at this over the years, that we start viewing different groups of different people based on visible identities or, what we perceive, or stereotypes, and all those sort of, horrible judgments that come into play. And that's not allowing authentic identities to come to the forefront. So I think this piece around authentic identity is also when we value diversity in its broadest sense, or value, different groups of people, it's ensuring that they can be authentic, that we're not predetermining what it means for them to be authentic, right? Or, I can remember going back many years when we used to run women's leadership programs, and it would be like, hey, we'll train all women to be more confident. And I'm like, what makes you assume that every woman's not confident? And it's that sort of continuous thing. That's the danger, right? So we're saying, oh, we want them to be authentic, but we're assuming what their authentic identity is. And that's the piece we need to get away from. Because really and truly, and I say this a lot, that even someone who looks like me, right, resembles the same, ethnicity, or, look, let's take my brother who looks very similar to me. We have completely different sort of personalities, completely different things that are important to us. I mean, even within the D&I space, there's things I strongly believe in and he doesn't, and vice versa. But that's the authentic identity piece.
Yep.
That's important, that nothing's predetermined for me by the company. And just on the piece of authentic identity, you're bringing your whole self to work, which I hear a lot of, right? The truth is, no one brings 100% of themselves to work. I mean, if I, not that I do anything wrong on the weekend, but if I turned up, behaving the way I did on a Saturday, it might not be, the best way for the workplace. But what it is, the clear thing, or the clear definition is that choice of how much of yourself you bring to work should remain with the individual, not the organization. And once that choice goes to the individual, then it's creating and allowing that authentic identity to come into play.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the big piece. And I do believe that no one can 100% of themselves is difficult, but at least the choice should be theirs.
Someone said to me, or was asking me the other day, it was a 3-person conversation. I was one of them. And I was just like listening to a particular person. And that other person had this like gravitas, like full on, like confidence, like I am like the stuff, like I am just, and I don't walk that way. Like I have a funny balance about how I show up, but it's like strength, empathy. I have like that soft, hard side. It's just the way I am. So the other person who was counter listening to him, and I said, wow, that's like amazing. And he said, don't you feel that way? Don't you have that in you? And I'm like, I mean, some of it, like I feel like I'm called to do the work I do and I do that work well, but I don't feel, this is terrible to say, but I don't feel godly in that regard. I don't feel above everyone, or like I don't even like when people call me an expert. I just go, I know a lot of this and I put in a lot of hours, but it's just, you know what I mean? It just makes me feel uncomfortable. But in that space though, I've struggled to the whole authenticity, because for me, it's like, I want to be, I actually like the balance that I hold, the balance of both humility and strength and all of that, right? I don't want to be, I look at it and sometimes I go, I would like to be like that person kind of, and then it's like, but I don't think I can pull that off, right? As a leader, thinking about, as you're talking about, as you show up in the workplace, how do you present yourself? And is it really you, or are you just like a stamp of other people walking around, right?
Exactly. And then the thing with that is, how will people remember you? How will people value the difference that you bring if you're just like everyone else? And that's when you end up with things like group thinking and, decisions being made in the same way, getting the same answers for everything because everyone's thinking the same. And I completely agree with you. It's one of the things. I remember a couple of years back, I was in a board meeting, and someone turned around and said to me, that they wanted to help me, and this is where when people want to help you or they perceive that they need to help you, so they turn around, they're like, as if you haven't said anything, please do speak up. And so I turned around and said, look, I really have nothing to say within this conversation, and if I try to speak up, it will probably not come out the right way. Like I'm not, but the interesting thing was their perception was, oh, he's not speaking as much as the others, right? So he needs to speak up. The problem was not that I wasn't speaking as much as the others. I just had nothing to say on that occasion. Yeah. So this thing of, judging a person or assuming that, well, because everyone else is doing that, this leader should have the same quality. I don't think that works. It doesn't enrich our experiences. It doesn't bring different styles of leadership into the organization. And I think that's the big important thing, that we allow for those leaders who will do things differently to be able to sort of come into the workplace and everyone has their own style. Everyone does things a different way. I mean, I watch some of the big leaders. Even if we look at their sort of current sort of situation with the pandemic and returning to work, and as you know, some companies are saying people should come back, some are saying they shouldn't. Some are saying something in between, and just watching the leaders and how they articulate that or how they express that is just so fascinating, because it's like you see a replication of how certain leaders would replicate what other leaders have said because that's what they've already said. And I'm like, it's not really authentic. Like, your people will listen. If you have a strong case for either option, why don't you say authentically to what is authentic? But replicating what another leader in another company said does not create that authentic leadership.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, we can't. Let's not be versions of someone else. Let's just dig deep and be who we are. I love that.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm curious to know, where does your drive to lead come from? Like, what is it that put you on this path to just be someone who is a leader, whether you are silent, whether you are, right, and someone who's speaking loudly? How did you start off?
Yeah, so I guess for me, it's been one of those things that I felt strongly about standing up for what I believe in. And that sort of got me into the leadership path, because I can go back to a time when, and you know, as you know, I sort of work in the equity and inclusion space. I can go back to a time when no one wanted to speak about it. And when you mentioned it, you were usually shut down very, very quickly. And at that point, someone had to lead, right? Someone had to be the one who takes the rejection every single time. So I opted to be that person. You know, I was like, look, either we can sit around, you know, and talk about how things are not right, or things are not working, or things are not the way they should be, or I can champion it. I can stand up and, you know, represent, whether it be a group of staff, whether it be a group of employees, or even friends, and just, you know, stand up for what I believe in, whether or not I'm able to bring about change, but just be able to stand up for that cause. And then it sort of stemmed from there, and it started from there, where, you know, it was like, well, I'll go and I'll champion what we believe in. And during that time, there was a lot of learning. There was a lot of learning around understanding that, you know, how do you pitch as a leader? How do you go in and pitch something in a way that, you know, it's not seen that you're an activist? Because, you know, the truth is, we talk about activism in numerous ways, and but the fact is, people are not that fond of, when it comes to, you know, that activism within the workplace. And so how do you be an activist, but do it in a way that it lands within the group that you're speaking to, and, you know, you almost sort of do it in a way that you're seen as a leader for championing it, rather than it just being someone who's, you know, bitter about something, or someone who's just negative about something. And I think that, again, those have been some of the lessons over the years. And, you know, even as a leader, I've had some great successes, but I promise you, if you look at the failures, I could probably write about 7 books on how many times I've failed. But you don't see that, right? You only see the positive stuff, and you know,
yep.
like, oh, you
not
did
on my
that
show.
Yeah.
Okay, before I go on to that thing, because you realize a perfect segue, but does it stem from something? For example, were your parents activists, or were your parents like, did they foster this leadership thing in you? Or, you know, it's for me, I always find it's usually like 5 or 6 different tracks of why we decide to lead people. Like, where did it start from that perspective? Like origin story almost.
Definitely. So I guess for me, it really started. So I told you I'm currently in the UK. I'm originally from Kenya, East Africa, born and raised in Kenya. And it really started from my time at university, where, you know, voices like mine, there was not many people from Africa or Kenya within the university. And our voice was always missed. It was just one of those voices that was never heard. International students, no one really cared. They just brought a lot of money into the university, but we weren't part of anything. And it really stemmed from that. I was like, you know, I really need to, like, you know, Africa is a huge continent. Kenya is a huge country alongside all the other countries, Nigeria, Tanzania, and like all the students we get, but we had no voice. There was no one really championing our cause. And, you know, that's where it sort of stemmed from. I still remember setting up a BRG in the university for, you know, people from Africa, because it was like, hey, we need representation. We need a voice, you know, and so that's where it really stemmed from not having a voice, and then sort of sitting back and thinking, we need a voice, and we need to, and also, you know, the negative perception of, you know, because of some of the cultural differences. So, you know, and it's not the whole of Africa, I don't want to stereotype, but, you know, especially for me growing up in Kenya, we were always taught to be very respectful and, you know, never challenge anything and put your head down. And when a leader was in the room, you just didn't say anything, you just looked down. And it was really interesting for me that adapting that style was going to get me nowhere in the UK. You know, we had to sort of stand up for what we believed in. So it was a combination of that really sort of took me down that path.
I knew there was something that attracted me to you as I would look at your posts, and that's my origin story is the same type of thing of like not having a voice and feeling like I wanted other people to have a voice, and then that same exact thing you just took me on. I always like to find that out, because sometimes I find it ends up being like a handful and a half reasons why people decide to lead.
Exactly.
And this is a popular one for particularly for people who are like from marginalized groups already. Exactly. You know, we didn't have a voice. My people didn't have a voice, or these people, whatever it was. And I felt this way in some way. And so now put me on this whole path of making sure other people do. So I always like people to hear that, because, I think I always talk about leadership. Number one is a journey. It's not a destination, but it's the idea that we have a whole bunch of choices we can make about how we show up for ourselves and how we show up for others. We have choices. So like there's so much less that we can't control than we think. And that's because what happens in the workplace, particularly, you were talking about this before, as a senior vice president, executive vice president, a CEO, a COO, you're at the point where you have a level of confidence that you do have more power, because you do have more power, that you have more ability to show up more authentically, have more power to make certain decisions. And then as you get lower in the organization, those people maybe feel less. So they feel, powerless, in most cases, helpless in many organizations, many times. And so my message is always, that is true. It is the power structure. It's there. There's just no way around it. It is there. But then there's so much in our shoes we can control. So many ways how we show up for others is huge, Definitely. Right? Huge. And for ourselves, which is like primary, actually. How do we show up that way so we can really reveal our best selves? So, want to inspire loyalty with your leadership? Take the Caring Leadership Self-Assessment today and discover what actions you can take personally to uplift your team and your organization. Created in conjunction with my best-selling book, The Art of Caring Leadership, the Caring Leadership Self-Assessment is designed to help you identify key areas for growth so that you can become known as a leader with heart. Once you complete the self-assessment, you'll instantly receive a free report highlighting areas in which you can improve. You'll also have the opportunity to upgrade to a more detailed report providing you with additional insights, as well as recommended next steps for your journey as a caring leader. Simply visit caringleadership.co and click Self-Assessment to take the Caring Leadership Self-Assessment today. Okay, now what I want to do, I want to transition, because I already see you're like highly emotional intelligent. You like got an amazing background. You're just awesome. Okay, now we're going to transition to, which is great because it shows another level of emotional intelligence, for you to share a story specifically, if you can, of a time when you were not the best version of you. You were not the best leader. You were not the caring leader, the leader who, really did focus on others more than yourself, kind of thing. So I'd love to hear that. What story do you have for us? And then just, share us the details and tell us what you did to come out of that phase of your leadership journey.
Yeah. So what, I guess for me, that would probably go way back in the sort of beginning of my my journey as a leader, and it goes back many years. And I don't know if you remember me mentioning this or if you saw it on my LinkedIn, but I started my career very initially in the police service. So I joined the police service after I graduated, largely because at the time, growing up, being a person of color, we used to get stopped by the police all the time. And then I thought to myself, actually, to be the change you want to see, you need to be part of the system and the process to make a difference. So I joined. Although I did a bachelor's in management and human resource management, I gave up wanting to go join a consultancy firm and said, you know what, I'm going to join the police because I cannot accept being stopped every other day or being stereotyped or being treated in a certain way. So I joined the police service. And during that journey, and within the police, I eventually went on to head up the Equality, Diversity, and Human Rights Department for the police. But when I initially joined, it was really interesting because I went in with all this sort of, great drive to be this different leader, to lead my people, to be a voice for the people that I represent. But going in, the system was set up in a way that it really was difficult to do that. And there was a style and a way that they did things. And I found myself, and I reflected on this. I still remember it was a period of time when there was some demonstrations taking place. And I was leading a team of officers, and we were there. The demonstrations were during the time when in East London, for those of you who might be in London, but it's a predominantly minority community, predominantly from Bangladesh and South Asia. And there were some demonstrations going on there, and we were part of that. And we were communicating with the community, right? And we was, as the lead for the team, I was trying to engage with the community and so on. But I was doing it as what I was taught to do, like what other police officers did. And then, and we did it, and we didn't make much, headway, and it didn't go well. And, there was no trust in us. And it's a much bigger story. But at that point, basically the key outcome that we needed, which was to build trust and confidence in that community, didn't happen. Even though the color of my skin and the color of their skin was exactly the same, but I wasn't authentic to myself, right? So I was trying to be like my colleagues who were predominantly white, and I was trying to behave or talk the way they did because that's what was expected of a leader. And I reflected on that for a long time, and that's actually one of the reasons that I then decided to move into doing more work around equity, diversity, and human rights, because I was like, what a missed opportunity. And I it could have been a great opportunity because I can speak the language. I could have communicated with them in a very different style and really built that trust and confidence, both of the team that I was leading and of the community that we were engaging with. And it was missed because I opted as a leader at that point to do what every other leader I had known or what people had taught me to do, rather than to be true to myself. And I always remember that because it was a missed opportunity. And I made sure after that I never, ever do that again. If I have something that creates an advantage for me as a leader, something that supports me in better engaging, whether it's an understanding of a community, it's a language that I might speak, whether it's any sort of similarities, it's to utilize that. It's to utilize that lived experience rather than trying to suppress it because no one else has it.
I love that so much. Thank you. It just even having this conversation, it opens up this invitation to other people to kind of show up as they are, come as they are. And that means in all our humanness, just so you all know, that doesn't mean come as you are, some perfectly presented person, right? I mean, that's not what we're here for. It's not what life's about. So I think I love the way you say that. And there's just so many rich lessons there. Interesting. Yeah. Very interesting with your background that you chose that path, but it was probably an experience you needed to have in order to show up like you do now, right? As the person you are now, as a leader now on stages, on talking about DEI, all these things, right? So, yeah, I love that story so much. Thank you. Yeah. So I am curious for those who are, gosh, they might be struggling right in this space. It's like a couple pearls of wisdom you like to leave them with, but maybe it's in this space. You've already kind of given us a lot of it, but what might be a couple pearls of wisdom you'd leave the people with that could be needing some extra energy, struggling with not the go along to get along type of philosophy with leadership, trying to have that identity and keep it out there. What might be a couple pearls of wisdom you'd leave them with?
So I think the biggest one is probably one thing that you need to leave at the door as any leader, and you need to forget about, which is imposter syndrome. It happens to all of us. It continues to happen. I will not lie to anyone and say that I haven't felt it throughout my journey. And I don't feel it even going forward. I do. But what I've come to realize, it's a mindset. It's in my mind. There is no way. I mean, I find it very hard, similar to what you said, to believe that I'm actually good. Or, when someone says, oh, you've got this award or you've got this. And I'm like, no. And I almost doubt myself, right? Because it's just not, it's not me. But I've come to realize that I need to let go of that imposter syndrome. You cannot, there's no, it should not exist. And even the environments that create that doubt in your head need to be challenged. So if someone or an environment creates that, we must challenge back, because we should not hold on to that. No one else does. Others don't. Others, even I've seen over the years, people who are not even good at what they do, but their confidence or, the way they articulate their leadership, like, you go, wow, they must, and in the back of your head, that they don't know it, but it's that level of, how they let go of the imposter syndrome. So that's the big thing. Let go of your imposter syndrome. Don't let it drive you. Don't let it base you. It's not to say it won't happen. It happens to all of us. I promise you, even if you take the most successful people, the presidents, the king, whoever, they have all at some point faced imposter syndrome, whether they'd like to say it or not, they have. So it's learning to overcome it and to let it be is so important as you progress on this journey. I think the other big thing about leadership is humility, right? So it is about acknowledging that you'll make mistakes. It is about being happy and ready to be corrected, as much as we hate it. All leaders talk about, please do come and tell me, my door's open, come and tell me if there's anything. And the moment someone comes in and tells you something, you're like, how dare they? They're like, they're a junior person, they're an apprentice, or, they're just doing work experience. How dare they come and tell me, being, whether you're the SVP, EVP, CEO, whoever you are. But I do think humility and the importance of learning is critical for a leader, right? Because it is what you will emanate amongst people. People will value a leader who's ready to accept their mistakes, a leader who's ready to say, you've got a point. Even though I thought this, you've said that, and actually your idea is better. And that's not defeat, right? Because there's this perception again that it's a sign of weakness. I mean, how can a how can an apprentice tell me what should happen? No, no, no. We have to be, we have to be ready to accept our mistakes and yeah, be ready to adjust in that way. And the last piece is leadership is a continuous journey. It evolves. It evolves as we learn new things. It evolves as we're in new environments and new places. And I think being ready to continuously learn is a huge piece. Learning is a lifelong journey. I mean, I learn till today, even in the space that I work in. I learn every day. I learn from people. I learn from different people's experiences and so on. I am in nowhere an expert, but I have some experiences that I can rely upon. But learning, as long as you have that open learning mindset, you will continue to grow, because that's what leadership needs. The moment a leader closes the doors to say, I know it all, I don't need to learn anything further, that's the point you go wrong.
It's interesting. One of the things that hit me, and this is like, it's bias, it's lack of information. And I realize you and I have something else in common. So my mom is white and she's Jewish. Mm-hmm. And growing up, no one ever, they just thought I was a Black woman. They never knew that I had a mother who was white and Jewish. And so I'm from the bloodline of Israel. Like I am actually, I'm someone who could be a citizen there, right? But no one would ever look at that, never guess. And then when you said you're from Kenya, I didn't even know, because I've never been to Kenya. So I would have said, oh, I wonder if he's from Jordan. I'm sure you probably get that, like, right? Not from Kenya. Mm-hmm. So what I mean is this, my message, I think what I'm getting to here is I experienced it myself right here on this podcast, but thinking through how we can't make assumptions about what people look like. When we look at this idea of inclusion and diversity, we need to be thinking it below the surface. We need to be thinking behind the person, because it's like, to a large extent, this just tells a tiny bit of our story, the thing that's on the outside. And so like you and I was like, oh, I had a connection to you, because it's like, wow, both of us don't really look like the traditional of what you might think of. And all of a sudden, like, there's a surprise. And guess what we had to do? We had to talk to each other. We had to ask questions and spend time to uncover and to dig deeper, right? That's just like a huge lesson here.
And you know what? And that's, you're so right. It's the layers beyond the layers. Like, I mean, I even get a lot of people talking to me about, of course, race and ethnicity, because they can see I'm from a ethnic minority background. But I've got two young kids, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. Biggest diversity challenge of my life, but no one talks to me about it, right? Because I'm trying to be a more active father, a present father, but it's not talked about. No one, like everyone talks to me about my race, and I'm like, I've been this skin color for the vast majority of my life, right? So it's not changed. So I've learned to, don't get me wrong, there are days when, there are some challenges, discrimination, racism that are faced based on my skin color, but majority of the time, I'm used to navigating that. Young family, I'm not, but no one speaks to me about that. And then on the flip side, the other thing, and it just made me think as you were speaking, one of the things I do talk about is sometimes based on what people see and perceive, even when they're trying to be positive, they create a negative through that. And let me maybe put that in an example. So I was speaking at an event a couple of months back, and as I finished, this lady came up to me at the end, really nice. She's like, great to meet you. She's like, I just want to say it's great to see everything you've achieved despite all odds. And I was like, oh, thank you. And I'm like, all odds. I'm like, sorry, do you mind just elaborating? What do you mean by all odds? She's like, oh, it must have been really difficult growing up, coming from a lower socioeconomic background and not having access to opportunities. And I was like, look, and of course I didn't cancel her, but I was like, hey, let me give you some insights. I'm like, I went to private school in Kenya. I had a fairly good upbringing. I've been to some of the best universities. So I'm not the picture. And she was very apologetic. And I was like, no, I'm like, but what I said to her is, I'm like, what you're trying to say is that I should be very fortunate or lucky to be where I am. And I'm like, I don't think so. I've had the same experiences. I've had access to opportunities. I'm not saying people who look like me have the same path. They don't. Some do come from low socioeconomic backgrounds. Some have struggled. That's not my struggle. So you've automatically assumed that that's what links me to that. And it's the same whether it's faith, whether it's race, whether it's sexual orientation, disability, and so on. There is this automatic assumption that if you have one of those things, then this is what what you've been through, or this is what your experiences have been. And we need to challenge that, because that could be a positive statement, or a positive stereotype we're trying to bring out. But it's a negative, because the individual's lived experiences and their life is not about what you assume.
Yeah, and we talk about the death by 1,000 cuts, so they don't realize that in that moment where they're trying to be nice, it's actually a microaggression, and we're actually it's pain. It causes this like this subsurface pain for us that we just kind of blow off and go, oh well, like they didn't know. I'll just kind of educate them. Then again, taking so much time to have to educate them all the time. I mean, so there's a circle that's there, and like I said, I'm just going to go back to what I initially said. We all have a choice on how we show up. We all have a choice on how we treat people and how we treat ourselves. And a lot of that is educating ourselves and also showing grace for both us and them. So I think, that's really the message here. And it just came to me at the last minute. I'm like, oh my gosh. And we have that same dynamic going on. And yours is probably even more complicated because I just look like a Black woman. You present as like a whole, again, the way you present. So they may be going, oh, you have this experience. You're like, absolutely, I don't. I have a Kenyan experience. Like, it's like a whole nother thing. So we got to talk about this.
Yeah. Or you even get some of the stereotypes, right? Because it's the assumptions around things. And one of the things I get very often, actually, when I tell people I'm from Kenya, is, oh, you're not Black though.
Yeah.
And I'm like, have you been to Kenya? Like, when you look at the history, the Arab trade, the sort of interracial, marriages, Kenya there's people from all sort of backgrounds.
Only people I've known from Kenya are actually like African, like they're, dark skin.
Yeah,
so same thing with me. Like I said, I was doing it as a person who's, raised in the US. I'm biracial. All kind of mixed up, right? Too. And I even did it and so I just wanted to come out and say, like, I was doing it, and it just hit to me that, like, how are we? Because that was happening to me my entire childhood, and like, what happens here? People would be talking about Jews, and I'd be like, do you have any clue that my mother's, like, my entire family on this side is Jewish? So you need to be careful what you say. But it's just the idea of we need to be careful about how we show up. Which choices are you making? That's the question. Which choices are you making? So, this has been, this is awesome. I think you and I can go on and on and on. This has been great. Such a gift. And for those who are listening now and just have found a lot of value, probably want to hear Steve a lot more. You can obviously find him on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure we have some links for you there. But definitely share this far and wide. The show is moving up management ranks in the US and in Belgium. So the more you share and listen, the better. And then don't forget to write that review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. That's just going to help it even more get socialized out there. This has been amazing. I'm just so thankful to have you here, Steve, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, just thanks for saying yes.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for joining the Leadership with Heart podcast. Be well.